Despite my carelessness, I managed to save everything. My trust in my parents caused me to lose everything. My parents never stole from other people. I experienced theft. I believed they would safeguard me, yet I find myself engulfed in debt. I am 20 years old. I'm still learning things. One thing, though, has always been clear to me. I would rather not squander time. My buddies continued to fantasize about parties and trips. In my dream, I was actually making something, a future. I have my own space. The vehicle is small in size, perhaps a small business someday. I didn't require much. I wasn't attempting to flaunt myself or chase luxury. All I wanted was something for me. I started my first full-time job in October 2023. This one is quite decent. He earns $4,000 a month, which is equivalent to 14,600 dirhams. I felt pleased. I thought I was entering maturity at last. However, I also recognized that I was still in my financial infancy. I had never dealt with large sums of money. I have never worked with investments, savings plans, or taxes. So I took what I believed to be the appropriate action. I gave my mother my paycheck each month. Definitely. We share a home. I don't enjoy going out to parties. I don't spend much. I reasoned that I should let her handle it. She is my mother. She nurtured me. I am not as knowledgeable about life as she is. I assumed she would help me establish a foundation and save for me. I had total faith in her. I simply asked for what I needed whenever I needed it. She always gave it as if it were no big deal. I therefore thought everything was going smoothly. I imagined that I had money stashed away somewhere. The number may not be millions, but it is enough to feel safe. It was my pay after all, correct? August 2024. By then, I had been working for more than a year, getting up early, traveling, juggling work and school. I am attempting to fulfill my lifelong dream of becoming a trustworthy grown-up. I didn't spend much time out. Unless I needed anything, I didn't go shopping. There should be no fancy dinners, no electronics, and no impulsive purchases. I therefore believed that I was doing everything correctly. I assumed I would have saved at least 145,000 AED by now, given my monthly salary of 14,600 AED. Take it or leave it. In my opinion, the money was more than just numbers. It stood for my future, freedom, and independence. Thereafter, our family's vehicle broke down, once more. After years of service, it was now formally beyond repair, and I felt like I could take over for the first time. Don't just borrow or beg, give. My goal was to get an automobile. I just need a decent car to transport me to and from work, nothing fancy. I was sick of relying on other people to get me to my training program, which was miles away. So my mom and I sat down and I said, I believe the time has come. I want to purchase a car using my savings. She gave me a prolonged gaze. Then she uttered the words that I can still hear today. There is not much left for you. I initially believed her to be kidding. What are you saying? I chuckled uneasily. I haven't really spent any money. She appeared uneasy. Only roughly 12,000 AED remain. 12,000? My chest constricted. I recall the room whirling a little. Some mistake must exist. She claimed to have spent the funds. For emergencies? For the house? However, she lacked receipts. No monitoring. No justification. Only a hazy hand gesture. It felt as if the work one had done all year had been in vain. Stunned, I sat there in quiet. She didn't help me save this money. I earned this money, and she spent it. Without requesting, without disclosing. I tried not to panic. Attempts were made to consider a more substantial cause. Perhaps there was something I hadn't yet figured out, so I took a different approach. All right. I'll simply use the bank to finance the car. Are you able to assist with the down payment? Just 20% perhaps? Subsequently, her statement that day was more profound than anything else. Yes. However, you will need to reimburse me. The experience broke me. After delivering each salary for almost a year, no inquiries, no restrictions. I was now required to borrow money from my mother and repay her in a way that was unfamiliar to me. I gave a feeble smile, nodded. But at that moment, something changed inside of me. Not merely disillusionment, it was treachery. The situation is not one that involves shouting or banging doors. There was only a small, agonizing fissure in the trust space. I reflected on all the times I had hurried to work in the morning. After lengthy shifts, I had spent many late nights studying. I made all the minor sacrifices because I believed they were protecting my future. However, it wasn't. The drain was occurring behind my back, and I didn't know that this was just the start. Following that discussion with my mother, in my personal life, I began to feel alienated. Everything I believed to be true was instantly unsure. My childhood house no longer seemed secure. I was no longer able to trust the individuals I loved the most. And I began to ask questions I never would have imagined having for the first time. In reality, where did the money go? Who was responsible for it? Why didn't anyone inform me how much they took? I needed to discover answers. Not to accuse, not to engage in combat, but rather because I had to comprehend what was going on in my life. I then took a closer look at my pay. I was aware that it was going into a bank account that my father had set up for me years prior. They referred to it as a child account. I was too young to understand anything about banking at the time. To be honest, I never considered changing it. Nobody advised me to. I had faith in my parents. Why should I be concerned? However, now, I accessed my bank history. I went over the numbers. We are working line by line. And there it was. I have 5,000 AED to spare, retracted, each month. This was not done by me. This item is not suitable for me, but by my father. He had been deducting my entire payment of 5,000 AED each month without uttering a single word. Worse, he wasn't holding it. He was giving it to my mother personally, as if they were both aware of some sort of monthly covert transaction. However, I didn't. In the meantime, my auto loan was automatically deducting an additional 4,000 AED. I therefore have just over 5,000 AED left over after 14,600. Furthermore, even that was still under my mother's authority. I couldn't get in. No sight. No liberty. I had a full-time job, earning actual money. Nevertheless, I was powerless over my life. The knowledge struck with a jolt. It was more than just poor management. It was more than a few unexpected costs. A system existed, one that was intended merely to supply, not to flourish me. I was embarrassed, utilized. As if I were merely a source of revenue, she is not a child, no human. It was simply a paycheck that they could access at any time. Furthermore, the money was no longer the main factor. Trust was at issue, about getting noticed. I talked about being aware that I was important. And the individual who most damaged me? My mother wasn't the one, it was my father. I always felt closer to him as a child. I believed he understood me. I would discuss my goals, aspirations, and business ideas with him. However, now, I became aware that he had been silently taking from me, month after month, without even checking on me. He didn't even express gratitude. And in the back of your mind, I began to ponder, if this is how families behave, who is ever truly on your side then? December of 2024? I had spent months attempting to maintain my composure, arriving in class, grinning at work. In the background, I pretended that everything in my life was in order. However, I felt exhausted. Mentally, emotionally, and financially, I had many fumes. The surprise of discovering that my pay had been deducted, the powerlessness of not having any money, the violation of my upbringing by those who treated me like an ATM, it was killing me. Next, one evening, I chose to speak with my father. He was the understanding one at all times. The person who dreams, the person who once said stuff like, "You'll be a boss one day. Your life will be your own." I reasoned that perhaps, just possibly, he would be able to relate to what I was going through. I told him everything, how lost I felt, how was my debt swallowing me. I felt so deceived by everything. Initially, he listened. He gave a nod, remained silent. "Let me talk." At last, I said, "Someone notices me." However, he then mentioned something that caught me off guard. "Really, I wanted to discuss something with you as well." He informed me that he was developing a secret business idea. There is a contract for the shipment of oil and fuel. Anything global, connected to Ukraine. He said that he was serving as a middleman. All he needed was a little assistance. I needed a little push to get things moving. 11,500 AED. That's what he requested. That's all. and he swore that the returns would begin to come in by February 2025. He would reimburse me. He would reimburse everyone. The situation was certain. I was taken aback. He was aware of my difficulties. He was aware that I had just learned that they had taken all of my pay. However, rather than offering an apology, he was requesting more. He did not, however, characterize it as taking. He phrased it as having faith in him. He said that no one else trusted him. But you've had faith in me all along. He was correct. Yes, I had. In spite of all, despite the lies, the quiet, and the withdrawals, there was still a part of me that hoped he had noble intentions. I replied, yes. However, I gave him more than just 11,500 AED. I visited the bank and obtained a 125,000 AED loan. I did the best I could. I didn't want to merely assist. I wanted to let him know that I had complete faith in him. I remained with him. It was only temporary, I reminded myself. I was confident that the money would return by February. This time, things would be different. He gave me a direct look and stated, "You won't be sorry, I promise." And for a second, I trusted him because I was forced to. If I hadn't believed that he was real, I would then have to come to terms with the fact that I had no one left to trust. January 2025 arrived sooner than I anticipated. The new year brings with it new objectives, fresh pressure. I was struggling to keep my composure. I am working full-time, going to school, and paying back the auto loan. I am currently carrying a brand new personal loan of 125,000 AED. However, each time the panic struck, I recalled what my father had said. We will return the funds in February. Just persevere. So I persevered. I waited, I thought, since I desired to. After all, I wanted to think that my father will never again tell me lies, that he was at last serious this time. He truly had a plan. However, February arrived. Furthermore, there was no payment. There is no fuel bargain. There was no return on investment, just silence. In the hopes that it was only a delay, I gently questioned him about it. Hey, any news about the company? He gave a shrug. Some complications arose, he stated. But it's close, so don't worry. I waited for a little while longer. There are still a couple of weeks left, then another. It was the same each time I asked. The bank experienced a problem. One partner retracted their commitment. We have not yet completed the paperwork. You must have faith in me. However, I no longer felt trusted. Panic struck me. I was ill, because I already knew in my heart there was no company. If it was real, it wasn't genuine. It wasn't working. It was only bringing back more debt and despair. I began researching his past at that point. Really, it wasn't on purpose. Merely putting together tales, I had heard stories as a child, but I never asked questions about them. I recalled hearing that decades ago, my dad took out a loan of 4 million AED. Furthermore, there was no repayment. He is known as the idea guy. I always had a big plan in mind. I am constantly looking for the next great thing. I am constantly becoming involved with dubious friends, dubious promises, and dubious endeavors. Additionally, I had somehow persuaded myself I thought I was unique. I knew he wouldn't harm me in that way. However, he did. He took advantage of my affection for him, just as he did with my money. With fluid language, lofty aspirations, there is no accountability. I also looked at my accounts at the end of January. How much is the loan of 125,000 AED worth? Lost. The focus is not on frivolities. I was not on vacation. I couldn't even point to anything and claim it as mine. It had disappeared behind unfulfilled promises, illusory expectations, and family debts, issues that I never had the authority to resolve in the first place. The banks now demanded their money. I also had nothing. It's just a used automobile. I have an empty wallet. The house is quiet. I stopped acting as if I was fine after January was over. The funds had vanished. My auto loan payments continued to arrive, and now I had to bear yet another debt, not from the financial institution, but from the one individual who continued to regard me as a person. She is my closest companion. He'd noticed how anxious I was. He had overheard some of my experiences. Even if I didn't tell him everything because I felt ashamed. Really, I'm ashamed. Nevertheless, he provided assistance, 45,000 AED, No inquiries, no agreement. Simply repay it as soon as you can. And I'll forgive you if you can't. That meant more to me than words can express. Not only the cash, but the faith, the elegance. It was everything I hadn't received from my family. However, that money had also vanished, consumed by commitments I didn't choose. Fees for college, the vehicle that my family continued to drive, was never maintained. Urgent repairs, food bills, 100 minor issues that continued to accumulate. What's the worst? Nobody seems to notice. Nobody uttered, "This time, let me assist you." Nobody inquired about my well-being. Nobody returned a single dirham. Rather, it was more of the same each time I returned home. "Can you pay the bill for this month? Your sister needs assistance with school-related tasks. We don't have enough groceries. Your father needs a lift." It went on forever. I had issues every weekend when I got home. I was always more worn out at the end of the weekend than when I started. I began experiencing chest pain when I woke up at night. It was actual piercing anguish, not a metaphor. Episodes of anxiety, insomnia, fatigue. I was 20 years old, and I felt old, worn out, utilized by themselves. And to exacerbate the situation, my vehicle, the one that I funded, paid for, and kept up, was disintegrating. The service was overdue by approximately 1,000 kilometers. It continued to overheat. Each time I turned the key, the check engine light flickered. However, I lacked the funds to fix it. I didn't even have money to keep it going. I began to drive while intoxicated. Occasionally, I would pray that the car would simply break down. This will allow me to finally stop moving, give up acting, give up carrying everything. I was unable to inform my mother. I was being dramatic, she would say. I should be grateful that I own a car at all. I was unable to inform my father. He would most likely tell me that the business only needs a bit more time. One more week. One more month. This is yet another instance of deception. I was also unable to inform my pal. He had already donated more than was appropriate, so I said nothing. When I could, I smiled. I sobbed when I was by myself and pondered, how did I end up here? How did attempting to assist my family go? Ultimately ruin me? I spent more than an hour sitting in my car one Saturday night. Turn off the engine. I have the keys. Everything is dark. I had no desire to enter. I could hear it in my mind already, the queries, requests, and grievances. The burden of spending yet another weekend at home weighs heavily on me. Another list of issues, seemingly in need of a human solution, awaited me. I muttered as I gazed at the steering wheel. I am no longer able to do this. Additionally, for the first time, I wasn't complaining when I said it. I had meaning behind what I was saying. I had nothing else to offer. Not cash. It's not time, not power, not optimism. Everything had vanished, gradually, until I was only a shadow of who I had been. What were my dreams at the beginning of my career? Lost. I missed the thrill I used to have from creating a life. I am buried under shattered trust and bills. What's the worst? Nobody ever paused to inquire about my well-being. Not once. I did not have any money in my account. That was not the case at the time I obtained the loan. Not until I began skipping meals to make ends meet. It didn't matter if I had dark bags under my eyes when I got home. She heard a voice that was almost strong enough to cry out. My only task was to proceed, to be the one with strength. I am the one who is accountable, the supplier. And I thought that was love for a long time. I demonstrated my care by giving my all, even when it caused me pain. Now, though, I know better now. One-sided love is not the norm. You shouldn't feel completely drained. Love appears, it catches attention, it returns the favor. Moreover, what I had been referring to as family was no longer the case. I never signed the contract. I never consented to a debt. This is a ruse masquerading as loyalty. Thus, that evening, I decided. I refrained from shouting. I had no intention of arguing. I simply intended to stop. Give up trying to repair everything. Don't save folks who wouldn't save themselves. Give up on promises that were never fulfilled. I would still be concerned, continue to adore them. However, I would no longer let the process consume me. And that basic fact that I was entitled to pick myself felt like a breath of fresh air after spending months submerged. Months have passed since then. I still have very little. I can hardly get my automobile to run. My money? My money remains at zero. Every day I wake up with the knowledge that I owe more than I earn. The weight is still there, however, something has changed. Me. I've changed since I handed over my paycheck without inquiry. I'm not the young person who borrowed money to establish his reliability. Furthermore, I'm not the son who thinks that love is synonymous with silence. I still reside at home. However, I have established boundaries, quiet ones. I no longer agree to every request. I've started keeping track of every penny I make. Additionally, I have divided my money account. I've also begun going to therapy. I initially felt awful about it. I felt as if discussing what they did was a betrayal of my family. But gradually, I understood. When someone's actions broke you, you didn't owe them your silence. I've discovered that being the good child does not equate to being the invisible one. That generosity does not equate to being a doormat. There is no debt associated with that love, true love. How do I relate to my parents? Difficult. I adore them. I don't trust them, though. Not quite yet. Perhaps things will change in the future. Perhaps they will realize what they did to me in the future. However, I no longer look forward to that day. I'm going forward. Slowly. Silently. However, there is a purpose behind it. Additionally, if you're reading, if you've ever been taken advantage of by those who are meant to keep you safe, if your early years were characterized by guilt rather than safety, if your first paycheck vanished into the turmoil of someone else, I'll tell you something, you are not to blame. It wasn't your responsibility to fix them. It was never your intention to carry more than your age. You're worthy of happiness, calm, security, even if it means establishing a barrier, even if it means beginning from scratch. Currently, I don't have much. What do I have, though? My lucidity, my limits. Finally, I introduce myself. And I've discovered that is more valuable than anything I've ever had taken from me.